Today I am with Lianne Wilson, and we met during our Cornish conversation groups that Lianne works on with CAM, and they put together some really wonderful resources for people like me who are coming to the language to learn it for the first time and actually get some practice in and to make it a real and tangible part of my life. And first of all, I want to thank you for all of the work that you and the others in the group do to make it such a welcoming and kind community for learners like me. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And Lianne, I mean, in your own words, could you tell us a little bit about you, introduce yourself, and why Cornish? What's so special about Cornish for you?
Yeah, so I'm from Cornwall originally. That's where I was born. That's where I grew up until I went to university and ended up sort of getting stuck in Cardiff and just sort of making a life there. But yeah, I've always been taught, I guess, that being Cornish is not being English and that it is a separate identity. It's a separate thing. So that sense of Cornish identity has always been very strong for me. And I've always been a languages person. I pick them up fairly quickly. I mean, probably not in terms of some of the polyglots you'll be talking to over the conference, but so they've always been something I've enjoyed. So I always wanted to learn Cornish. It's just that it didn't seem to me when I was growing up that was something I'd be able to do. And it wasn't until I moved away and came to Wales and started learning Welsh. About 3 years into my Welsh, I sort of finally had a sort of last straw instance of defending Cornish online to people who said it was dead, and I went, right, you know what, this time I'm going to make it work. Yeah, just started learning online, sort of self-taught for the early bit, and then sort of managed to get into a class when lockdown hit. And yeah, just it's always been very important to me as part of our identity that we keep all those things that make us different going. And to me, a language is a huge part of any identity. So
Yeah, you'll get no disagreement from me on that whatsoever. I'm interested to know, actually, because I went through a similar thing with Welsh, reclaiming Welsh as a heritage language. And it really resonates with me what you're saying, because it feels like that kind of process. How does it feel speaking this language that you know your ancestors spoke and reclaiming it?
Just incredible, really. Like I said, I've always enjoyed learning languages, but there's something about this that is just feels different. And I think it's just knowing that it's mine. I'm not particularly a spiritual person, but it's almost like that. It just feels very important and almost healing in a way. And these are, I mean, for people who don't know me, these are not the sorts of things I usually say. I'm normally fairly practical, so it just feels incredible. It's a real sense of reclamation, of healing, of doing something important, I guess.
Yeah, I completely identify with everything you said. And there is something sort of, it almost brings you some sort of peace.
Yeah.
And I use soul nourishing, and depending on whether, what people's perception of the soul is, I just think sort of that inner, whatever your inner essence of you, and what makes you you, obviously the body, but also the inner you, the whole being of you, it feels nourished. That's how I felt. Is that something you can identify with?
Yeah, and again, these aren't the if you said this to me before I did this, I probably would have just blankly looked at you. But absolutely, yeah, it all that what you're saying really resonates with my experience of it. I did a little drawing for Inktober a couple of years ago, right near the start of learning Cornish, and I just of me as a silhouette, just with bricks being put in to make up the body, and each word was just a word I'd learned in Cornish, and that's what it feels like. It feels like sort of constructing walls, not in a sort of exclusionary way, but almost like making a building, making something that can shelter and can yeah, support things. I don't know.
No, I love that you feel like that, and I love that it's not how you normally feel.
Yeah.
That's well, I mean, that says a lot about reclaiming a language like that, like
Yeah.
Cornish, and I think that speaks volumes. It's not the same as another language or language journey that you might
Mm.
learn that has maybe different feelings attached to it. It's a very different feeling. One of the things that I found particularly surprising with the Cornish community is just how accessible it is and how everyone's welcoming and they want you to add to the experience for each other. And I've just found that really encouraging. And as a language project that I took on for, I thought, maybe a year, and here I am starting my third year of Cornish. Um, I've really got into it. I really enjoy it, and thank you for being part of that. There are a number of things, having spoken to lots of other people around the world, as I do with the Polyglot Conference. I'm really keen on Indigenous, endangered, and vulnerable languages, particularly, and scratching my head to think of what works well in one community and doesn't in another. And in Welsh, it's very easy to point a finger at the Ulpan course and the way that the Welsh system for teaching Welsh has become extremely practical. You can learn to speak quite quickly. And other courses, I mean, that was based on the Hebrew course, of course, for Ulpan, for people to learn Hebrew, to bring communities together very quickly, right? Coming from different languages and cultures. Cornish doesn't necessarily have the Ulpan, but it does have the different grade levels, and it does have this wonderful community of people who will just get together and rally round and make it real and make it tangible. One of the things that really stands out to me about the Cornish community in particular is Wikipedia. And you're really into Wikipedia and with others as well, not just you, but tell me a little bit about how you see Wikipedia and writing and that creation as a part of the process.
Yeah, so I sort of I fell into it a little bit. I was doing some translation for Minecraft, I think it was, and I wanted to look something up, and it just is really useful for me when I'm learning something, not always a dictionary, but something where I can just see something in context. So you've got your vocabulary item that you're looking up, and you can see the other words that are used with it, just the surrounding vocabulary, I guess, and you get a sort of quite good sense of the kind of language you're going to need when you're talking about something. And I couldn't find exactly what I was looking for in Wikipedia, and the Cornish is a bit like this, and possibly other sort of minority languages are quite like this. If you don't see something you want, you just kind of muck in and do it yourself. So I just kind of got involved and just started writing for Wikipedia, and was very lucky to have a couple of people who I asked about it, because my Cornish was still fairly basic at the time. It was, I hadn't done any exams, so it was very hard to judge exactly where I was, but it was fairly basic, and I was just sort of told, well, go for it, why not, what's the worst you can do? And that's one of the real benefits of Wikipedia, is that you can't really go too far wrong. Obviously, a lot of people in various language communities will have heard what happened with Scots Wikipedia, but even that, arguably, Scots Wikipedia is in a better place now than it was before that happened. So,
well, yeah, it got Scots speakers talking about it.
it rallied people around. People
Yeah,
went, right, we've got something to fix, and they all mucked in, and it got people involved that might not have thought to be involved before. So it's that sense with Wikipedia that even if you do something huge like that, it's all fixable, and you don't need to sort of attain perfection immediately. You can sort of go in and you can write a one-sentence article. If there's no article, a lot of the villages in Cornwall don't or didn't have articles a few years ago, or some of them still don't. And it's quite easy, just if that's your village, you probably can write a little sentence about just where it is,
yeah.
and that's an article.
So
So I
it's
think,
really a little bit or a lot. It's how much you want to add, and then because it's a living encyclopedia, Wikipedia, I guess you can just keep adding later, and people can adjust or change or.
That's it. I think the first article I wrote was about tea, and it was really basic, and it was probably, I mean, it was riddled with riddled with problems, you know. And I looked back at it a couple of years later and went, oh, I can fix all these now. I know what I did there. And this is exactly it. You can start really small, just with one sentence, and then come back to it, or someone else can chip in and solve a problem you had, and it's just really collaborative, and but it's really at your own pace, which is just great.
Yeah, that, I mean, it is. It's a lovely idea. I mean, this, and I know that you talk about it a lot during the sessions. And how do you actually get involved? I mean, you know, what do you need to do to be able to set up a Wikipedia account and page? Is it easy? Can anyone just do this?
It's relatively easy. It depends on your sort of general level of familiarity with the internet. The Cornish community tends towards slightly older speakers, so it's been a bit of a struggle getting people into it for them. But for anyone who's sort of fairly internet savvy in general, I would say pretty easy. You don't even need an account, although it's probably better if you do have one, just because it's easier to keep all the things you're doing in one place and sort of do things. But yeah, it's pretty simple. You sign up and make an account if you want to, and then you're just away. And it's really just as simple as finding what you want to write about, seeing if it's already there. If it's not, you'll click a button about creating a new page, and you just write. You can either write in the editor itself, or you could write it in Word and then paste it in, and then everything else is just Wikipedia markup, which is another thing where it's as complicated as you want to make it. So it's perfectly possible, if you're not really that tech savvy, just to write the article, just to write your 3 or 4 sentences or whatever, upload that, and it wouldn't have any links, and it wouldn't have any of the stuff that makes a Wikipedia article sort of like a Wikipedia article, which isn't ideal. But then someone who does know what they're doing just comes along and goes, oh, right. Oh, well, I'll add a category to that, and I'll add an image to that, and yeah.
So, I mean, can you copy things that are already there in a language that you know? Let's say Cornish, for example. I guess most often people would copy an English article, or could copy an English article.
And that's mostly what I actually, until quite recently, did, is just whole cloth go to articles in normally simple English was what I use, just because they're shorter and easier for me to work with. There's a translation feature if you like that. It's pretty good. And you can that will show you on one side your source language and give you a space for your target language on the other side. And you will just click to copy the elements, which is usually just paragraph blocks at a time across, and then edit those in the window. And yeah, I don't use the translation feature itself much these days, but what I will do is go to an English or simple English article and just copy chunks that I like, that I want to include in the Cornish, and just translate them, because it's easier for me than sourcing entire reams of information, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And anyone listening thinking, well, okay, I can set up an account, I can go to Wikipedia, I can set up an account, I can start finding articles that I want to translate into different languages or use and adapt. And these could be from anything, whether it's, we're talking about Mexico, for example, into one of the many indigenous languages from Spanish. I guess they could do a similar thing. And particularly starting, like you said, with Cornish and Cornwall, looking at things that are relevant to Cornwall, like about villages, about things that are in Cornwall, and having those, make sure they're in Cornish. And I suppose people could go through a similar process wherever they are in the world into local, indigenous, endangered, and vulnerable languages. If the language doesn't exist in Wikipedia, can you add it?
You can. There's a process for it. It would need to be added by going and asking through the incubator. The incubator is a sort of I don't know a lot about it, because obviously Cornish was already there, so I was quite lucky. But the incubator basically is where they will create language Wikipedias that don't yet exist. And once they have a sort of certain amount of things made, then that goes to like being fully live. It's relatively straightforward, I think, in terms of documentation. Certainly if you're an English speaker, the documentation is there. I don't know about for other languages, but yeah, it's not too difficult a process, I think.
Okay. And then the actual editing itself, are there like courses available or things that people can look for, videos, YouTube videos and things like that? Are there things like that available for?
Again, I think if you've got a sort of a bigger language that you can look through, yes, though you'll certainly have something like that available. English Wikipedia almost has too much information sometimes. It's almost too helpful. There's a lot you can look at.
Yeah.
It's for smaller languages, there's going to be less available. But to be honest, the great thing about Wikipedia is because it's all based on the same website and it's all based on the same stuff, a lot of that knowledge is transferable. So if you've got a language where you can find the documentation, you can probably copy a lot of that, physically just lift it from bits, and that would work fine.
Okay. So I mean, that's really good because I mean, people who are new to this, there are ways and means of finding it. I mean, are there communities of people who edit that you can find as well online through other languages who will be able to give a hand or answer questions?
Yeah, if there's not, it's pretty easy to make one and learn together, to be honest. But yeah, a lot of communities will have meta.wiki is for the sort of running of Wikipedia. So it's rather than your articles, it's for doing all the rest of it on top of that. So for example, the Celtic Languages Editathon, which is going on this month, is all being arranged through MetaWiki. And that's, I think, the sort of go-to place for looking for on Wikipedia groups of people for certain things. But I mean, for Cornish, we didn't have anything like that. So we just made a Facebook group and we invited people to it. And a couple of us knew a bit more than the others. So we would teach the others and we would learn what we didn't know and try and pass it on. And it's all it's all the kind of things where you can build not only the language you're working on, but your knowledge of how to do it at the same time. It's all quite hands-on. So
I do like that hands-on approach just generally in the Cornish community. It really is super evident. I mean, you took COVID and ran with it when it came
yeah.
to, or, you know, the whole online community just, I don't know. Was it like that before COVID or was it just COVID just went, because I only met you all when COVID happened.
Yeah, so I'd been learning, let's see, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe before COVID. And there was some of it, but a lot of it was stuff you had to be in Cornwall for. So there weren't classes online really. There was a London class and there were classes in Cornwall, and that was your lot. And I don't think there was really, unless you were lucky enough to meet someone who would sort of tutor you online. No, but there were things like Say Something in Cornish and resources online, but it really has just bloomed, honestly, in COVID. All the classes went online and a lot of them have stayed online, even though they don't actually have to be anymore. And obviously the conversation group where we met, that came out of COVID.
Yeah.
That was something I'd been thinking about doing, but COVID really made it obvious that it needed to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really amazes me with our group is just the places people come from. We have people joining from New Zealand, from the US, from I think Australia now. There's somebody in one of the groups that I've been in, but they're from all over the world, and even Spain, right? There's even somebody in Spain who dials in, and it just amazes me that you reach so many people, and I think this is one of the strengths of the Cornish community. I mean, how did that come about? I mean, how did the idea of setting up a group and actually having that group come about? I think it's brilliant.
Well, I mean, I've always been, I mean, my entire learning of Cornish has been me stuck up here in Cardiff, not in Cornwall. So I always felt as if something like that should exist, and I knew about these. We call them Yethanwerin. It just means language of the people, and it's a sort of informal get together of Cornish speakers, and they were usually held in pubs, sort of at the start of the revival, or in cafes or something like that. So I knew of them. We had one in Cardiff that I would go to every month, but the idea of doing one online, it was sort of in the back of my head. And then I had a friend in America who was learning, and then I had a friend in London who was learning, and there were enough of us about that couldn't go to Cornwall and do these things. And then when COVID hit, it was the final sort of kick to just, all right, well, we should definitely have this. And since I suggested it, again, I just kind of mucked in and went, all right, I'll do it then.
Wow.
So
I mean, it is a fantastic idea, and I think it's actually a great model and example to follow for other languages as well. And the thing I think is the strength is that it's other learners encouraging new learners, people who have been at it and learning it for a while, sharing their knowledge, practicing. And then you also, because there are two groups, right? So you have the group that I tend to go in most, which is still people getting to grips with conversing in Cornish in the sort of the beginning stages right the way through to sort of you can have a bit of a conversation.
yeah.
And then you've got the advanced group, right, where you actually have people who are quite, well, really quite fluent speakers of Cornish, and you just chit chat in Cornish.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do you find it leading a group, for example, where you're learning, or being an instrumental part of a group where you're learning as well? I mean, does it feel natural now? Did it feel natural in the beginning? Did it feel weird? How was that for you getting into it?
I think I was lucky that, like I say, I progressed quite quickly with languages, and because I had Welsh, my Cornish quick learning was really quick. And so the first Yethanwerin I went to in Cardiff, I'd been putting off going for months, because I didn't want to English up the place, is what I said. I didn't want to make them have to speak English since I was there, since I know that's their one chance to speak Cornish every month. And then I went to that, and I was producing sentences and understanding the conversation. So I think I was lucky in that although I definitely was not perfect, and still am not perfect at speaking Cornish, I had enough that I could sort of lead the beginners group, although Cam now mostly leads it because they're just better at it than me. They're fantastic. I had enough that I could lead it and not feel like I was leading people too far astray. And then the advanced group is just kind of, it's a different thing. It's just a sort of chill, it's a more sort of standard Yethanwerin, where it's just a chill chance to chat. And that's also fairly easy because you don't have to say a lot. I mean, we get people coming, like I know you occasionally come along, and a few other people occasionally come along who mostly come to listen, or they'll say a few things and then they just let the conversation sort of wash over them. So yeah.
It's actually very useful to hear people speaking it in such a fluent way. I mean, this is the thing I found actually quite reassuring. And I think when people learn languages, very often there's this whole idea of you have to learn from somebody who speaks it as a first language. You have to learn it from somebody who speaks it perfectly. They have to have the perfect accent. They have to have the perfect everything. And this just destroys all of those barriers, because you just get in and do it. And I've actually found the opposite feeling of, it's reassuring when you say, do you know what, I don't know that word, let's have a look at it. Okay, what word could we use, which words could we put together, how would we say that? And I love that you have that serious thought, even for people who are kind of new to the language, who've got like sometimes really random questions, let's be honest, about vocabulary things that you think, are you ever going to say that again? But I love that you and Cam both just really go for it.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can cobble together to make that work, and it will be understandable to a Cornish speaker. And there is something just really reassuring, and it makes, as a learner, it makes you think, wow, they can do this, and they can still, they don't worry about, okay, is this a mistake, or actually let's see how we do this, let's let's scramble together and see how we
Yeah.
make it work. And there's something really quite nice about that camaraderie, I think, that comes out of that.
I think it's fairly necessary in Cornish. I mean, we don't have a great body of native speakers. We've got a handful, and honestly, some of them, having gone through the English school system, are now not fluent. They're technically native speakers, but they're maybe not fluent. And so we don't have this big bulk of native speakers to rely on. We don't have the perfect Cornish speaker. I don't think the perfect anything speaker exists, but in Cornish, we certainly don't have it. So we just kind of got to muddle along and learn as we go and teach as we go and kind of all work together. And yeah, I think you're right. I think it's actually a really big strength in a way, because it shows people that you don't have to be perfect and that you can kind of just give it a go.
Yeah, do you know the other thing that I found actually quite interesting with Cornish particularly, and that I see with Nahuatl, which is the local language of Cholula, where we're going to have the conference in Mexico. The interesting thing is the different variations of writing systems, ways of writing and spelling things. So as a learner, that used to freak me out. I mean, it used to freak me out that you'd have like different people writing in different ways, but with the same language. Like, how does that work? And in Nahuatl, it's been kind of explained to me in ways of different peoples came in and wrote things down as they saw on their own linguistic norms and stuff like that. And Cornish has kind of had its own, you know, sort of some groups want to write in one way, others in another way. And I know that was a contentious issue for a while, and possibly still is. But one thing I have to say, that I've actually found people that I've been learning it from quite mellow about it. As a learner, they've been very gentle, and they said, do you know what? It doesn't matter. It's Cornish. It's not like you're writing in hieroglyphs in one of the forms. It's still, if you're writing in Kemin, the common way of writing, or Swift, standard written form. I mean, if you're writing double O or OE, it's not rocket science to work out that it's the same word if you know a few simple differences, right?
Right.
How have you experienced that yourself with this? When you did you start with one form and switch? Did you just have one?
I was very lucky, and I sort of just wandered into the biggest Facebook group for Cornish and went, look, I know it can be a bit contentious to ask about spelling. What should I do? And one of the responses I got was basically just pick one and run with it. It doesn't really matter. Just go. Just learn something. You'll work it out later. And I just think that's a great approach. And I'm not sure if it works for every language, but for Cornish, it definitely works. All of the systems of writing Cornish and the two sort of main sort of systems of speaking Cornish are very similar, that you will be able to muddle along. And you might not at the beginning. At the beginning, you might get a bit confused when you see something spelt 2 different ways, 3 different ways. But the more fluency you pick up, the more comfortable you become with the language, you realize that actually it's not a barrier at all. No. So I just think it's, you just pick one and run with it. And I don't, I have my preferences, but I don't like to be too precious with it, because I just think it's unhelpful. And I think a lot of people these days are the same, because we had that sort of quite contentious period where it really did get a bit sort of shouty, I guess. We're sort of recovering from that, where we're sort of now most people are fairly chill and are fairly gentle, and
that's definitely been my experience with the Cornish community. And I think your advice of pick one and run with it is sane and very sound advice. And I do get asked that about other languages. Should I learn the different ways of writing it? And I would absolutely agree. It doesn't matter the language. Pick a way of writing it, and for you that works, go with it. If you're happy with the materials that you have, go with it and just run with that. Because if it's in essence the same language, it's not going to be the end of the world for you to learn one way and then understand passively the other way, be able to read it, for example. I mean, it's really not that big a deal, is it, once you get past the basics? I mean, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. I really, really appreciate it. Are there any other comments or thoughts that you want to add about Cornish, or things that you would you would say have been learning journeys for you with Cornish, with the community, that you would say, okay, I'd like to pass this on to anybody else out there thinking, I'd like to work with another language group or community, or even Cornish, but another one, for example, anywhere in the world? Things that you'd say.
I think I've been saying this kind of throughout, but just give it a go. It can be quite a difficult experience sometimes as an adult learner of a language. You feel quite easily embarrassed sometimes, things that as when you were a child you wouldn't have even noticed you were saying something silly. Just try and not worry about that, and just give things a go. Honestly, my entire learning experience with Cornish has just been jumping in and trying things both feet first. So, and it's worked out really well. And I think honestly we could all just do with trying to just give things a go, and they probably won't turn out perfect, but you'll probably learn something on the way. So
that's a lovely way of putting it, and I think I've definitely learned a lot from listening to you over the last couple of years in the Cornish group, and I really appreciate it. So Miraz these. And it does actually really resonate with there's a story, and I want to sort of finish with this visual. I like visuals. I always talk about, if you want to create a beautiful Easter egg, whether you believe in Easter or not, it doesn't matter. Just imagine the image of an Easter egg, right? It's all really nicely decorated and very pretty. It's got lots of colors on it and bows on it and bits of tinsel or whatever it's got on it and glitter. Okay. If you talk too much about the detail of what that end product will look like, you end up doing nothing. Without the actual egg there in the first place, you've got nothing to decorate anyway. So before you talk about how it's going to look and how beautiful this Easter egg is going to be, how many hours you're going to spend decorating it, get the egg first and start with the egg, and then start worrying about which colors you're going to add to it, and then start adding to the egg.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you'll end up hopefully with a beautiful black and white Cornish egg. Thank you so much, Lianne, for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. It was wonderful to speak to you, wonderful to watch this journey of the groups and how they've grown and over the last couple of years, and just watching you grow as well, and seeing you being celebrated, which I think is absolutely deserved by the Cornish language community. You're, for me, one of the bedrock people, and so I absolutely love what you do and have immense admiration. So thank you, Miraz.
Oh, thank you for having me, Miraz.